Hello friends, welcome back to the another video, and in this video we are going to talk about CSS pseudo elements. I have seen many developers, they don't even use CSS pseudo elements after and before in their projects, and I don't know what the reason is, but they are very simple to use if we understand them correctly. So in the next few minutes I'm going to show you everything about CSS pseudo elements that you need to know in a very simplified way, and after that you can use them in your projects like CSS experts. So if this sounds interesting, then watch the video till the end. Also make sure you subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. So let's get started. Alright guys, so I have a simple HTML document here and I have an h1 tag and I have a content of pseudo elements in it. And for the CSS, I have the default CSS. I have removed the margin padding. I have given a background to the body and I have used a div and given a display flex to it so that I can get my content in the center of the screen. If you don't know about the display flex and flex properties, then I recommend you to watch my Flexbox tutorial and I will add the links in the description below. Also, I have used a 100 vertical height so that I can get the complete height of my screen. And if you don't know how to use vertical height and vertical width, so I have a dedicated video on the CSS units as well. So I will add the links in the description below so that you can check out later on. All right, so first thing I want to show you is what actually these pseudo elements are. So whenever you want to display some content on the screen, you use an HTML tag, and inside the HTML tag you add content, and that content is displayed on the screen. But there is another way that if you want to display some content on the screen and you don't want to use the HTML element, there is pseudo elements. These CSS pseudo elements will help you to get the content on the screen without using the HTML tags. And let me show you what are these pseudo elements. So we have two pseudo elements, after and before, and we are going to take a look on these after and before and how we use them in various scenarios. So we will take a look on multiple examples, and in different examples we will see how we can actually use these pseudo elements. But before that, I want to tell you that the pseudo elements and pseudo classes in CSS are two different things. They are not same. Pseudo elements used to get the content on the screen and do some styling to that content, but pseudo classes are only used to style the elements. For an example, so if you have an anchor tag, a tag, and you want to have a hover or you want to have visited, so these are the pseudo classes. And how we write the pseudo elements, we are going to write it an h1, then we are going to have a double colon, and then we are going to write before. So you will find that some of the examples they use a single colon and some examples they use the double colon. But we used to write the single colon before when there was CSS2, but when the CSS3 specification came out, they wanted to distinguish between the pseudo elements and pseudo classes. So they introduced that they will use double colons for pseudo elements and single colon for pseudo classes. So let's see how we can actually use them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a color. So I need a white color to it, and I'm going to give a background of tomato. All right, when actually I give this, nothing actually happens here. And let me give a padding. So I will give a padding of 10 pixel. But in order to get some element or in order to see the pseudo element on the screen, there is one important property we need to add it, and that is called content. You need to add a content property on the pseudo elements in order to pseudo elements show some data or show some content on the screen. So what I'm going to do, I will give a content of before. All right, and you can see when I give a content of before, I actually get a content on the screen. Similarly, I can do it for after as well. And let me show you how we can do. We will just change this to after, and I will change the content to after. So now I have a before and the after pseudo elements on the screen. And let's see when we actually inspect the element, how they are placed inside the element of h1. And let's see how it actually reflects in our uh, code. So I'm going to do an inspect element, and inside the inspect element, if you see, let me zoom a little bit. Okay, inside inspect element, I will going to inspect the h1. So this is my h1 tag. And when I expand this, you can see this is my contain, but before the contain, you can actually see the element. And if you can see the element, then you can apply all the CSS properties to style this element. So let me show you how we can do. If I want to change something on the before, having a color of white, let me change this color to something else. So I'm going to give a different color and I'll save it. And when I change it, you actually see the color is changed. So you can also apply that. If I want this pseudo element to take a complete width, then I can also do a display block. All right. And when I do display block, it actually taking the complete width. And that same thing I can do for my after as well. So I'm going to give a display block here as well. And now you can see that it actually taking the complete width. Let me show you some creative way actually what we can do with this. We can create some nice things. So I'm going to remove this content. We don't want this content anymore. And when I remove this content, you will see that this looks something nice. So if you don't use pseudo elements, then you need to have something on your HTML tag, and then you're going to style that part. All right. So this is one of the example of using the pseudo element. Let me show you another example of pseudo element where you can use. So now if you want to have the quotation, suppose you have some content and you need to have some quotation marks to it. That also we can do without doing anything on our HTML tag. Let me change this to a paragraph tag. I'll change this to paragraph tag. All right, so now we have the content on the screen, and I want to show you that how we can actually add the quotation marks on my text using the pseudo elements. So this is going to become a paragraph now because I will be using a paragraph tag. Okay, and before what I'm going to do, so you need to have a content. Content can take multiple things. You can give an attribute, you can give a counter. We are going to take a look on the examples of attribute and counter. You can also use URL and give images to it. We will see that as well. But for now, we are going to have an open quote. Okay, and I'm going to have a close quote here. And I'm going to give a close. And now you can see that we have a quotation mark, open and close quote. And I want to give some common styling to both the before and after quotation mark. I can change the font size. So let me give a font size of 1.5 rem. So now you can see that we have these quotation mark, and we actually can change the color of these quotes as well. So if I give the color, then the color of the quotation marks is changed. This is one of the scenario where actually the pseudo elements are very helpful without using anything on the HTML document. All right, the third thing we are going to see is how actually we can use the images. So let me show you how you can use the images. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to add a URL here. Okay, and I'm going to give images and I'm going to add an image to it. All right, and similarly, I can add an image to my after as well. So I'm going to give an URL slash images, and I'm going to use this image as well. So if you want to use image as a content, then you can use the image as a content as well. And you can actually, if you want to have this image content to take the complete read, you can simply give a display block, and that will give us the image, one on the top and one on the bottom. Here, one thing is that in this, if you want to actually scale or if you want to change the size of the image, then you can actually use transform scale. And let me scale to 0.5. I want to have this image as small. And if I save, the image size is now actually reduced. Let me increase the screen. You can see the image size is actually reduced. But due because of using this transform scale, there are some limitations. We cannot apply much CSS to the images. Let me show you another way of doing this if you actually want to use images in your pseudo elements. So what I'm going to do, I will just remove. I'm going to give an empty content, and then I'm going to give a background, and in the background I can use an image, and then I'm going to give an slash images, and I'm going to use this image. Let me use this image. All right. And I'm going to give a display block. I want the image upside. Width should be 100%. Height should be 50 pixel. Background size should be cover. And I'm going to give some border of 2 pixels. Solid hash 222. All right. And when I save it, you can see now that I have a complete image, and I can actually change I can actually apply whatever CSS I want to have to my image. And this similar thing can go for after as well. So what I'm going to do, let me just remove this from here. All right. And we are going to add some new image on my after as well. So I will just empty the content, and then I'm going to give a background image URL. All right. And when I save, you can see that now we have the image here. So this is another example of using the after and before the pseudo elements. Let's take a look on one more example where we actually be able to use this. So for that, what I need to do, I will comment this part, and I'm going to create a simple label, and I'm going to give a name, and I'm going to give an input type text, and I'm going to give a placeholder, and I'm write enter your name. All right, and I'm save it. In this scenarios, where actually the pseudo elements is useful is that whenever you want to have some field to be marked as mandatory or required, you can actually add a simple pseudo after, and in the content you can simply give asterisk. Okay, and you want the color of the asterisk to be red. So this is the one good example of using the pseudo elements. All right. So the next one I'm going to show you is I'm just going to create a list. So I will have a UL. I'm going to have an LI. This will become JavaScript. All right. So now we have an LI, and let's give some styling to this LI. Okay, then I'm going to have a width of 100%. And we are actually going to use a counter in the pseudo elements. Let me show you how actually you can have the counters. So I'm going to give a counter reset here, and the counter reset will be li. Okay, and for the li, what I want to do, I need to give a background of tomato, my favorite color, and then I'm going to give a margin of bottom so that we can distinguish between, we can actually separate the LIs, and then I'm going to give a padding of 10 pixel, 0 pixel. All right, so now we can see that we have a list, and now we need to add the counter to the list. So how we can add the counter using the pseudo elements? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a pseudo before, and in the pseudo before for the content, you can see that there is a counter name property. So if I enter the counter name property, and the counter is for li, and I need some space after that. And for the counter, I need a counter increment of li. Okay, and I'm going to give a background color teal. Okay, and I'm going to give a padding of 10 pixel, and I'm going to give a margin right of 10 pixel. Now you can see that there is a counter without using any HTML code. We have a counter to our list, and let's make a little bit nice. I'm going to give a box shadow to it, and going to give a 2 pixel of black color, and This is how using the pseudo elements you can actually create some beautiful list. So this is one of the example of using the counter. So far we have seen that we can keep the content empty, or we can use the URL image to the content, or we can use the counter to the content. Now let's see what is the attribute, how we can use the attribute to the content. So in the next example, we will see, I will just going to comment this out. We don't want this now. And I'm going to have this again, the first one. And here I'm going to give a data attribute. And to the data, I'm going to give a text attribute, and I am tool tip. So we are actually going to create a tooltip using the pseudo elements. So let me show you how we can create that using the pseudo elements. So what we are going to have, we are going to have this again. Okay, so now we have our content again. First, let's go to P, and I'm going to create a before. And in the before, I'm going to show you how we can actually get the content using the attribute. So we are going to use an attribute, and the attribute we have used is data hyphen text. So now you can see that there is a data I am tooltip on the before, and this data we actually gave it in our HTML data attribute. Absolute. If you have a confusion with the position absolute and relative, how they works, I have a video on that as well, and you can check that later on. I will add the link in the description. So I'm going to give a position relative to this, and then I'm going to add bottom 100%. I'm going to give a left of 50%. Then I'm going to use a transform property to get it exactly in the center. So that I'm going to give a 50%. Then I'm going to use some margin bottom 10 pixel, and let's see how it looks nice. Okay, so now I have a tooltip which is on my content, but it actually not looking like a tooltip. So let's add some more CSS to it. And I'm going to add a width of 180 pixel. Okay, and I'm going to give a padding of 10 pixels. So let's have some padding. Then background. Let's give my favorite color. All right, so the tooltip is shaping. We are going to give a border radius of 10 pixel. We are going to have the text in the center. Okay, so far let's keep it like that. And the next thing is we need to have a small arrow downstairs with actually it looks like a tooltip. So we can make this arrow using the other pseudo element, which is the after. I'll show you how actually you can create the arrow. So let me give a border of 10 pixel solid to use tomato color for the border, right? All right, and let me give the content, and we want the content to be empty. And one thing I want to show you that when actually you give a border, you can actually give a border color as well. And you can give border color to all the four sides. So let me give a border color to all the four sides. So I'm going to give a tomato first side. I'm going to give a teal on the second side. I'm going to give a black color on the third side, and I'm going to give a violet color on the fourth side. I'm going to give a left of 50%. I'm going to give a transform translate x minus 50%. And we need to give a position absolute to it as well. Let me make this 40 so that you can see. Now you can see that there are four sides of this triangle. If we want to have a small triangle for our tooltip, then we don't want the other three colors. So for the other three colors, you can actually give a transparent property, so that color will become a transparent. So now if I make it transparent, you can see, and let me do the third one as transparent as well. So now we only have the small arrow. Let me make it back 10. All right, so next I'm going to give a margin bottom minus 10 pixel. So now we just need to give the bottom of it, so that when I give the bottom, it actually go and attaches to the tooltip. All right, so now we have a perfect tooltip using the pseudo elements. Now let's do something, some transition, and when we hover on our paragraph tag, we actually want to see this tooltip. All right, so for the transition, initially I don't want to my tooltip to be visible, so I'm going to do an opacity 0. And similarly for the arrow also, I'm going to give an opacity of 0. And I'm going to give a transition property of 0.5 seconds to my opacity. And I will be using the same for this as well. Now the tooltip is not visible, but we want to see the tooltip when actually we hover our paragraph tag. So this is our paragraph tag, and this is our pseudo class this time. And when actually I hover, I want to change the after, and I want to change the before as well. Okay, and when actually I hover the element, I want the opacity to be 1 so that I can see my tooltip back, and I'll save it. Now actually if we hover it, you can see that this is the tooltip, and if I remove it, it goes. So this is one of the perfect example of using the pseudo elements. Now let's discuss that when not to use the pseudo elements. You should not use pseudo elements when actually your website is going to be used by a screen reader, because when it goes to the screen reader, screen readers actually cannot read the CSS pseudo element properties. And most of the browsers supports these pseudo elements, but there are some browsers, the legacy browsers, which actually don't support the pseudo elements. So far you have seen that we can use the pseudo elements on the HTML elements, but we cannot use pseudo elements on all of the HTML elements. There are some elements where we cannot use the pseudo elements. Let me give you a small example. So on the paragraph tag, if you see a paragraph tag, we have an opening and a closing tag, and there is a content in between it. When an element has opening and a closing tag, and then you have a content in between it, you can actually use the pseudo element. But there are some other elements, like when we saw the label and the input. Let me show you that other one. I'm going to do this, comment this out, and I'm going to get this back. So let me add on the label, before, and on the content I'm going to give a test. All right, so you will get the text here. Okay, and similarly we can have the after as well. So if I do an after, you will be having a text here as well. So on the label we can give it, but can we use the pseudo element on the input tag? Let's try it. So this time I'm going to give an input, and I'm going to use before. Okay, before, and I'm going to give a content of text again, and I've saved it, but I don't see any text. And what about the after? Can we use the after as well? So let me give an after, and we don't see anything. So if we inspect it, and if we try to see that do we have anything on the input, yes, we do have inputs. We do have before and after on the inputs, but actually it won't be visible because input doesn't have any content in between. So you won't be able to use for the images, which is a self-closing tag, inputs, which is a self-closing tag, and there is no content in the images or the inputs. So on such elements, the pseudo elements won't work. But the one elements which you actually have a content like paragraph tag, div tag, span tag, you can use the pseudo elements in there, and you can style your page. So using pseudo elements, you can actually make some cool stuffs without having using the HTML additional code. And that's the beauty of the pseudo elements. And these are most underrated because people usually don't understand them, how to use them, and that's the reason they don't use them. So I hope now you have a very good understanding on the pseudo elements, and you know how scenario or a case by case we can use the pseudo elements. And that's all about the pseudo elements. If you like this video, then a thumbs up is appreciated, and make sure you subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the other videos. You can also connect me via Facebook or Instagram. I will add the links in the description below. And if you want me to make some video on a particular topic which you are not able to understand it clearly, you can add that in the comments below. I will make sure that in the next video I'm going to cover the topic for you. And thanks for watching.